the staff and the students. Will you know which staff have been more significantly impacted? How would you take the temperature of your staff as to whom may or may not be ready to resume on-site work? Are you prepared to address that more directly with the staff? If somebody comes forward and saying that, really, I don't know if I can come back. I don't feel safe to come back. Or I'm not ready. Or certainly we know, as those who may have experienced very profound losses, and that may not be ready because the whole grieving process was profoundly changed. And a lot of people may have unresolved grieving that may still be going on. So a lot of people are throwing around and using the term trauma and saying that, yes, we all have been traumatized, and certainly many of our students, or all of our students and families and staff, are going to come back to school having been traumatized. Do you agree with that? If you can, please respond to it.
And Max, would you mind repeating the question for the group?
Well, we're using the term generally as this has been a traumatic experience for all of us. Includes the youth, and includes the families, and includes the staff in the school. So what I was asking was, do you agree that everybody is traumatized?
Yeah, so people are responding on chat, absolutely yes. Jen Hoffman wrote, families that have experienced loss and are out of work and don't have enough food are traumatized. Marie O'Doherty responded, yes, I believe that what constitutes trauma for one may not be for another person.
Beautiful.
Etc. So people are definitely chiming in with that.
Well, yes, thank you. So if we do respond that we have a community of individuals that are traumatized, and some more than others, we need to certainly obviously go forward to keeping that in mind and saying how we're going to prepare for this. How do we build some system in place going forward that is collaborative? And what I mean by that, that involves the families and involves the staff, involves the kids themselves, and any other entities that feel like they're essential with regard to our respective communities in terms of looking at this experience as having been traumatic, and how do we assess it at this point, and what do we want to need, what do we want to put in place, and what do we need to put in place to go forward. So in anticipation of schools resuming with the physical presence in the fall, that all of those things will be in place when the kids walk into the building. And we still do not know how they're going to walk into the building, and in what fashion, and what adjustments we have to make in terms of the physical structure, as well as any other adjustments with regard to instructional tasks. There's clearly worries about the future. We need to really take that into account very seriously. So it's the kids, many of the kids, the adults, and our staff are going to really worry about what next. Are we going to deal with this again? Or what next? What are the things that I have to worry about, I am worrying about, and how and who is going to help me with this? So, although, again, schools being educational settings, a lot of that is going to fall as frontline on the school end. And one of the things that we worked on for a long time with one of the Eastern Suffolk BOCES, Michelle Levy and I, for the last couple of years, we conducted a lot of meetings, and we had a number of other programs with school districts from Nassau and Suffolk County. Our goal was, at the time, to bring community resources together with the school districts to have conversation about how to engage each other and have community agencies introduce their services and talk to their school districts about what their challenges are, and school districts conversely let them know what our needs are, because the needs are definitely going to be greater, and we're going to need more resources in the community. And one of the outcomes was that one of the original concerns of the school districts were that we do not have enough resources in the community compared to all the SEL challenges and mental health challenges that we deal with in the school buildings. So as a result, we started coming up with certain ideas that I'm going to attend to a little bit later on to help the school districts actually think a little bit out of the box and go forward to engage community agencies to develop resources. One way to bring community resources more into the buildings, to create relationships. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, because one of the things that, with regard to what is happening, that we have to make note of more than ever before, is the fact that we're going to have more students and families that we have to know how to refer them and where to refer them to get the services that they need. We need to particularly be sensitive and keep in mind suicidal thinking and behavior, which we know for a fact that there has been an increase in the number of suicides during this period of time. And we know that suicidal thinking and other destructive behaviors, we mentioned a couple of them with regard to substance, but also other self-destructive behaviors, there is a rise of. And I mentioned the gun sales as pointing out that, unfortunately, using firearms is a method that is used very often by individuals to kill themselves, and that by itself become a warning for all of us. All right, so I'm going to, at this point, talk about these particular items just for you to know about, because there are some of them have been developed already. We have some track records I can share with you very briefly, so you can make note of it in terms of going forward. So we certainly, as a result of the meetings we had in the last 2 years, we came up with many additional resources. One of the things that you're going to receive is a directory of behavioral services in Suffolk County in particular, and there's one for Nassau County that is updated in 2020. So at least brings to your focus some additional resources that exist for mental health services. The other model that we examined with the school districts in the last 2 years was really kind of a consultation model. that school districts have at their discretion have an opportunity to engage an entity, and it may be a behavioral health agency or otherwise, to be a consultant to their school districts, because we have found that very helpful in terms of attending to the needs of the kids by providing a lot of the trainings and education, as well as reducing number of referrals to emergency rooms for emergency situations. So the consultation model seems to have worked for some of the school districts because it has reduced clearly the referrals to the emergency room. We made note of the fact that in both counties, there are developmental pediatricians. There are also called integrated pediatric practices, where they have social work or mental health professionals embedded in pediatric practices. So coordination with the pediatric practices in your respective communities is going to be a very big piece, and it may be very helpful to the families and you as a school districts with regard to expanding the resources you have for behavioral or mental health services. The school mental health model is probably one of the best models because it has a track record. For about 15, 20 years, these school mental health models have existed. Is basically a partnership based on an MOU between an entity, an agency, and a school districts, or a consortium of school districts, where there is almost like a satellite clinic in your building. You provide space and other supportive services, and there are mental health professionals, aside from your PPS staff, that are there providing more the therapeutic and family therapy, and medication management can be arranged within that model. I would particularly highlight that, and I want you to kind of make note of it. And I'll be happy to have my contact information at the beginning. We can help you actually develop that. So for those school districts at this point that would like to have more of a school mental health model implemented aside from the PPS staff that you have, some of you said that there is a shortage clearly that you anticipate having. This may be a good thing to develop. The other model that was developed, by the way, I think Rockville Center is one of the school districts that ended up developing a consortium of kind of adjacent school districts. They got together and engaged an entity to provide mental health services. So that's another kind of partnership to develop with neighboring school districts, where resources can be pooled in terms of attending to the needs that are going to be significantly greater than ever before. And that is given in terms of going forward. Any questions about these models at this point?
Just a reminder to everybody, you can add questions in the chat, and Bernadette and I will moderate, so feel free to add them there.
Okay. How many of the school districts anticipate having a fiscal shortfall as a result of some anticipated cutbacks? If you would respond to that poll, please. Any responses at this point? Okay.
Not yet, no. Oh,
Okay.
the other, are you talking about the first poll, Max? Or are you talking about a new poll?
The new poll. In
Okay,
terms of
18 yeses.
Okay.
19
All right.
yeses, 0 no's.
So meaning I'm taking it that means that they anticipate having fiscal issues.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And then that's a definite process. That means that some of the school districts that were short, as in their mental health PPS staff, they're going to continue to be short and maybe even more compromised than before. This was a survey that was done, just as an FYI, this was a survey done in New York City and Long Island families about going back to school. 52%, and it's noteworthy, about half, a little bit over half, said they will send their children with social distancing back to school. Now, I wanted to include this because it just kind of for you to keep in mind if you decide to engage all the families, if this is representative at all, that's saying only a little bit over 50% that they will send it. Only 19% of the families would have no concern and wouldn't worry about social distancing. That's a very low numbers, one-fifth, right? 16% will not send their children to school. So if we were to extrapolate, 1 out of 10 families or more, that 1 out of 10 would want to actually keep their kids home. How would we deal with that? 25% will not get a vaccine once it's available, and 45% will not get a vaccine.
Hey, Max, there's a couple of questions related,
Yes.
if I can share with you. First off, who conducted the survey and how many families participated in the survey, if you have that data?
The numbers are not profound. It was done by a consortium, this particular one. So I can get the reference for you, Don.
And do you know when the survey was conducted?
It was recent. It was within the last couple of months.
Thank you.
Okay. So New York State is conducting a large-scale survey, including a lot of these items, that I think is, at this point, even your point is well taken, Don, is preliminary. The samples are not humongous, but there are some trends for us to keep in mind, particularly for administrators and PPS staff, in terms of what the families may be thinking about. We conducted a survey about, this one I knew about 300, and that was staff at Well Life Network. And these are two, if we did a factor analysis, these were, the number one item was safety and security. And number two was uncertainty about the future and worries about when and how their kids were going to go back to school. The sample size was larger, but I think they all point to the same thing that we need to be sensitive about in terms of how do we prepare in a more, if it's the right term to use, how do we prepare in a more positive way, in a reassuring way, that when your kids come back to school, it's going to be safe? Would you please respond to that question? In what way are we going to be convincing enough to say, oh, we are nice people, we have been taking care of your kids, they're with us quite a few hours every day, we took care of them before, and trust us? And another question is, has our trust in general have been compromised? Certainly our sense of safety has been compromised. That means our staff and our families and some of our own some of the kids are not going to feel safe coming back. And that really clearly and very directly has to do with how do we incorporate SEL issues, concepts, even before the kids and the families get ready to come back to school? Any responses?
So there's a response from Jim, who writes, one of the biggest things I tried to do is minimize anxiety and maintain trust, maintain transparency. Transparency, although more difficult in the virtual world, is necessary to minimizing anxiety, reassuring people that the same way we turned our ship on a dime, we will tackle anything that is thrown at us. Eric, hey, Eric from Wantaw, many years ago. We will need to develop a committee of students, parents, teachers, and admins to discuss all perspectives and concerns.
Exactly.
This will lead us in developing a plan that is best. And there's a few other comments coming in, Max. Developing a clear plan with all stakeholders, building trust through transparency, honesty, and support for all.
Well, Eric, I agree. You articulated something that we all need to keep in mind. I think we need to think about how we prepare our families, the community, and our staff at this point, not obviously 2 weeks before school starts or a month before it starts. Right now, how do we prepare, and how do we approach the families in a way that is trauma-informed, taking into account that everybody is hypervigilant, everybody's trust has been compromised, everybody is cautious, and seems to be like almost everyone has higher level of anxiety and hypervigilance than before. So that's a question. Not that we have to have an exact answer, because one of the things that we found out in the last 2 years, as we interface with many different school districts, many with very big state aid package, and some with very minimal, and we saw that school districts are very heterogeneous. So are the families and the constituency that the school districts interface with. So the plans that we put in place may be obviously somewhat different, and speaks to the other comment made that there has to be a representative committee at this point, not just a school committee that addresses this. That's why at the onset I mentioned PTAs and PTOs as engaging them very early on as a representative, to engage them in this conversation. Most importantly, if we think about Maslow's hierarchy, what we really have to worry about the most is safety and security. How do we instill that? How do we convey it? Messaging is going to be very important. Trust me, it's not going to fly. Everybody needs to know, all the families want reassurances that their kids are going to be okay leaving their homes physically, getting on a bus, or even if they're walking because they're very close, they're walking, that they're going to be safe walking into your physical buildings. Even if you develop social distancing, attend to hand washing and everything under the sky, you're still going to have them being very sensitive about this topic. So at this point, if I may ask all of you to just write down, if that team, ideally, what would that team look like? This would be basically part of what I mentioned earlier. School districts having an action plan that you put together with a team. So who would you include in that team?
Max, just let me know if you ever want me to use a breakout room, okay?
Yes, thank you. Any comments? No, okay.
So we did have some comments. Nikki Stallone said principal, assistant principal, gen ed teacher, special ed teacher, nurse, member of security staff, parents. So really a cross section of the school community.
Beautiful. Did that include, it did include parent?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Anybody else?
Another individual added admins, teachers, parents, students, nurse, security, PTO, administration, teachers association, parents, student reps, the PPS team, school psychologists, custodians. So honestly, it looks like people are adding in that all roles are represented.
Beautiful.
Yeah, for older groups, maybe students as well.
Let me ask you, is any of the school districts represented here have that team in place already?
I know of a few that have already started this process, but I'm not sure if they're ready to share that yet.
Okay. 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 Okay, repeat of the same. So I'm going to go back. I put it at the end because we have to keep in mind that the families are going to come in back with somewhat different needs, yes? So we need to prepare for that, obviously. And number 2 says they want, as we said before, they want some reassurance that things will be okay. And how are we going to reassure them of that when there's so much uncertainty? So you see where the dilemma is for the school districts, right? Is that we're uncertain about the future ourselves, and we're in a position to have to provide enough reassurance to the families that things are going to be okay, and we're going to take care of your children in a safe way, and we are prepared to attend to all their SEL needs. When we know for a fact that we really do not have enough mental health services available. That is a dilemma, right? We're not going to have enough mental health needs, and the families are going to come back wanting to make sure there are enough support socioemotionally for the kids because of this adjustment. One question is, how many of the schools have done any training on emotional intelligence for the staff?
So you want a yes/no poll again? As
Yes, no is fine, just so not to waste a lot of time on it.
Okay, so the question again, Max, is if you have already provided some social emotional training for staff, is it before COVID-19 or during COVID-19?
But either one. But my interest is knowing that if that has been at the forefront of the school district's thinking about we need on an ongoing basis educate our staff and even our youth, the students, about what emotional intelligence is about.
Okay, so far we have 10 yeses and 3 nos.
Okay. All right, great. So certainly significant number of school districts are already attending to it.
Yes, and it's moved up to 12.
Beautiful. You hear mindfulness a lot nowadays. Is a very popular term. And in fact, many school districts have even used it in different ways, including in art classes, as a way of helping children with, kind of empowerment. If you were to do a survey of students, I think we will learn a tremendous amount about resiliency. And that information by itself, it can be brought back to the classrooms. So I strongly recommend all of you to think about developing surveys, and we can help you with that, for the families as well as the youth themselves, asking some very direct questions.
Max, do you happen to have a protocol or a, something that districts can use or teachers can use
Yes.
to guide them?
That's part of the material that is going to be forwarded to everyone.
Okay.
There are clear cookbooks with forms that exist for the school districts to adapt to their particular culture, because every culture is different, to go forward. And as part of the team we were talking about is actually the team deciding who do we want to assess. Ideally, we would assess the staff, families, and the students themselves. That may or may not be realistic at this juncture, but for some maybe. And that will bring about a wealth of information for us to use going forward and learn how to adjust what we're going to develop, as well as know where there may be less need and where there will be more need. And that may be very helpful in us going forward. We're more than happy. I'm going to go over some of the questions from our survey that we did. We'll be more than happy to also share that with you. And we're in the process of actually developing a survey for the school districts that we're more than happy to share with you through, if you're interested in terms of contacting me directly, or we'll just send it to Eastern Suffolk BOCES to distribute to all the school districts.
I think it would be best if you sent it to us so I could distribute it to everybody. But and also maybe we could post it on our think tank resources page. But I would also like, you had said in this resilience piece by asking, this is my question, children, how they adjusted, what did they learn from the experience? I think that's one separate kind of guideline for teachers to use with their students,
Yeah.
as well as social workers or psychologists.
Right.
And then another set was what you just discussed, which was the assessment. How do we assess students, parents, and staff? So those would be separate documents, right? Do you happen to have them like here that we could share them at some point in your presentation?
I have some of them. I'm going to try to look for it. Otherwise, we'll send it right after.
Okay.
Okay. So thinking about the as you were bringing up that question, there are some very simple questionnaires that, for instance, the pediatrician use all the time, and some of you who are parents know pediatric symptom checklist is a one-pager, very simple, that can be utilized as a way of families even assessing where the kids are at, as an example. But going back to the survey and asking the students, not just in addition to the families, is I think the students are going to teach us a lot, because the question should be worded in a way as, how did you deal with this? What did you do well? We know there will be a lot of challenges in terms of losses, in terms of economic losses, and a whole slew of other ones. But you're going to find out in your district, you're going to have many individuals, and many students and families that actually cope pretty well given. And among your staff, probably many dealt with obviously much better than others. So my question is, do you know what those variables are that make a difference? What component of resiliency do you think is important? And many people may have used more often than not, both on part of youth and the families and your staff. What do you think? Any responses? I can share with you one: social support and social connections.
Somebody, Mary Ellen Weaver, added in coping mechanisms. Mary Ann added mindfulness and meditation, self-care, another response.
Okay.
Okay. Matt, I do have one of your handouts that you had shared on the COVID piece. Would you like me to show that while you're transitioning to the next PowerPoint presentation?
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, hold on, everyone.
This is wonderful technology. Okay. Thank you.
I think you were faster than me.
Oh, all right. You want us to slow down?
No, that's okay. Go right ahead. Keep going.
All right. So this was a survey, to the best of my knowledge, about 130 families.
Wait a second, Max. I'm sorry. It's not showing.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And that survey that you're going to show us now too, I'm sure they'll want to know the same things. You said 130 families, but when it was done and by whom?
It was, this was done last month by Well Life Network, where this involved the families in the children's community programs that great majority of them have at least one kid that would be classified as SED. So okay. I can have that information.
Okay.
and the number. Let's see, we can look at some of the questions and the results, and I think it would be informative for the school districts to have, we're going to hopefully have double the numbers, so we're going to take a look at the statistics again. Okay, so let's go to the slideshow.
And I also have the handout ready if you'd like me to share that.
Okay, that's if we need more time. Let me see what the.
What region is that survey from? What area? Is that from our county,
Yes,
Suffolk County?
yes. Well, we are still have, while it's the technology is being worked on, Bernadette, do you want to show that? Or you want to wait?
I muted myself. I'll show it right now. Okay, so this is one of the handouts that Beth did send out to all of you, I believe, yesterday. And it says at the very beginning, key messages and actions for COVID-19 prevention and control in schools. And if you get to page 3 here, it talks about school administrators, teachers, and staff. And that there is a checklist on safe school environments below. You can see right here, which I think would be helpful, I hope. Do you want me to go over that? Let's see.
Yeah, just, yes, if you can just, kind of this, they see the heading. This is one of quite a few handouts that we'll be distributing that is really has a lot of very specific and concrete guidelines, as well as forms, checklists, instruments, and ways to, in terms of assess using the more trauma-informed base and taking into account a lot of the SEL concepts.
Okay, we have the addressing mental health and support, psychosocial support needs.
Right.
Supporting vulnerable populations. And here is a checklist for school administrators, teachers, and staff.
Okay.
Don, what do you think? Should we discuss this from the school's perspective? Do you already have this, most schools?
Well, I don't want to speak for everybody. We definitely have some guidance documents. The CDC has put out some guidance as well. So I don't see a downside to having this shared with the group if they don't have it already.
Okay. Thank you, Don. They're also going to receive some documents from SAMHSA related to the topic. We tried to kind of use document or share documents that are really more specific, not theoretical, that actually the school districts and school staff and teachers can use.
So this is parents and caregivers and community members in helping children cope with stress.
Yeah.
And difficulties that they might have.
Right. We're ready.
Oh, you're ready now?
I think so. I'm told we are ready.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, I will stop my share. Okay.
Okay. So we're going to go. Okay. It's not advancing. We were almost ready. No. You're not seeing it. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, we got it now. So, all right. So we picked out of the survey, we picked questions that we thought were more relevant in terms of some of our conversation. What are your family's primary concerns at this time? Giving them those choices. Interesting, right? Although academics all clearly are up there, but you see mental health being higher. And you see the rest of the items. Health and safety, 50%. And that's just a breakdown. What are your family's primary concerns once the pandemic ends? Still, same ratios. Has your family been directly or indirectly impacted by COVID-19? Directly and indirectly, that is 50% of the group. And this, we don't have really a breakdown. We don't know if there was a significant loss of immediate family or a friend, but still 50%. That means 50%. If we extrapolate 50% of the families coming back to your school buildings that have been affected. So this I thought even more significant in terms of based on the 132 that so far responded. Only 1 out of 5, they feel like they're coping. That means 4/5 that either they are up and down emotionally or are very stressed and anxious, about 35%. That is a very significant number. So addressing the anxiety through assessment, and certainly you're going to have some of the tools that you have and some of the ones that you're getting as to where they are at, and building it in as an initial part of the conversation with everyone would be very prudent. How concerned are you with the impact that has had on your family and continued way of life? That's 70–80% of your population. I'm concerned about the impact of COVID-19 has had on my child's emotional behavior. Wow, that's a whopping statistics, right? As we were discussing before, we really need to be prepared to address that ahead of time, because that's coming into our buildings. Now, what's going to happen in the next 2 months during the summer, whether it's going to be some relaxation of things, people are going back to work, there's some semblance of normalization. Coming fall, there's going to be a resurgence of anxiety, as everybody's talking about. We're going to have COVID again all over the place. We may have to repeat this whole cycle again. So some of the families are very much hyper vigilant about that.
Max, I totally agree with you, and this is great information, but I'm wondering if we can, if you don't mind, because we only have about 20 minutes left, and if you don't mind, if we could get to some solutions for districts as to what things they can put in place besides, in addition to the advisory committees that you had mentioned, what other things they can do to help those families feel confident and secure and help the safety and security of the students and the families in returning. Maybe we could look at those assessments that you had mentioned, or the guidelines for the question, the questions?
We can do all of it. Let me just quickly, these are very consistent stuff, consistent numbers, basically. I'm going to go quickly through it, and then, these are all different kinds of questions. Again, I'll be happy to share them with you. You can just email me directly if you want some of those questions. We're more than happy to share it. And I can get, kind of talk more specifically. Bernadette is asking. Again, I spoke about the team, and so the material are going to really speak to that very loudly and extensively about the specifics, asking school districts and saying, you need to customize this to your school district by establishing a multidisciplinary team, asking questions as to, are you going to assess your staff in some way? And if so, there are tools available. So you have to answer those questions first. Are you going to assess the families? Yes, no. Are you going to assess the youth coming in? Yes, no. And based on that, we have kind of a tools really to say, I mentioned one, pediatric symptom checklist is a very kind of quick instrument to use. So is your school district going to be inclined to use universal screenings at this point? Do you think that's a better fit for you? And you have some of those tools, certainly pediatric symptom checklist and a comprehensive list that I'm just going to come to you has a list of a lot of different ones. One of the ones I would suggest, if you have more time, is the Achenbach instrument, because Achenbach instrument has the parent version, has the child version, the youth version rather, and it can be electronically scored, and it will give you a lot of wealth of information. It really also depends on time commitment, on how much time you're going to allocate to this, and who is going to be a designated person to run this. You need to have an ambassador in each building, as well as in your school district, to manage this. And once you get these results, whether it's from the pediatric, I'm just using the pediatric symptom checklist as an example because it's very quick screening. You really want to use screening forms because they're easily administered. You can have the parents complete them and return them, or you can do it in other ways in terms of when they come back. But my recommendation is, because of what we see data-wise and what we know intuitively and otherwise based on our educations, that the crisis is going to be there. We have to deal with it in different ways. Our educational system and our instructional system is going to be overpowered to some extent early on by us attending to the emotional needs of the kids. So assessment tools that you have are one way to assess it. I don't think, and I think that the other mechanism that we need to activate in all school districts, because we don't have psychologists necessarily in every building, or a social worker or a guidance counselor, is to think about some of the educations, some of the trainings that we have online and otherwise for the teachers. They are the front line, that they see all the students. That probably is a very economical and prudent way, because they're the ones that spend most time with the youth. So asking a question about how much training you have done already for your teachers. Are your teachers trauma informed? That would be very simple to do in terms of a training. Are your teachers trained in terms of basics of suicide prevention? are your teachers trained in terms of how to engage youth and what kind of language they use as a way of preliminarily just getting a sense as to which young people may be not only at risk, but which young people are just struggling with all the changes and adjustments, and always having other data from the family.
Hey, Max.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Some participants are asking you to repeat the instruments, the assessments that you mentioned, so that we can put them in the chat.
The pediatric, I don't know if you see it. This is the pediatric symptom checklist.
We don't see it. You have to unshare and reshare again.
Okay, then I don't know if, let's see if we can do it. Pediatric symptom checklist and the Achenbach behavior inventory instrument. Those are the two things that can be easily incorporated by school.
How do you spell the Achenbach?
Achenbach. They're going to get that information in the handouts that they're going to be getting.
Is it the Achenbach system of empirically based assessment?
Correct. And that's, if you have the time and you can get, it's always better to get multiple sources of information. Your best source is the family, the parents, and the other source is once the kids come back, and also while they have had the contact with the students, is the teachers. So those two entities really are in best position, have probably the richest information over time about how a particular youngster may be doing.
And I'm so sorry, I missed the first one that you mentioned before Achenbach.
Pediatric symptom checklist.
Pediatric.
Can you put it, can we get it on the screen?
I think I found, is it from brightfutures.org? Is that possible?
Okay, let me see if it can be done. It should be, but it's a part of where it is, unfortunately, it's part of a packet. We may have to look at it, but I will absolutely make sure I send it to you, Bernadette, right away. And as soon as we're finished, I'll send those instruments to you to send to everyone. Questions?
So, Max, I think I found it, and I'll share it in the chat if I'm
Okay.
correct. It says the pediatric symptom checklist is a psychosocial screen designed to facilitate the recognition of cognitive, emotional, behavioral problems. Am I correct?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to paste this link in the chat to everybody.
Thank you, Don.
And another question was, is the Achenbach similar to the BASC-3?
Yes, there's a lot of similarity. It's like the Connors. It's the Connors instrument. It's like they all overlap, but Achenbach I like in particular because it has a wider range of what it looks for, and the fact that you have a parent version, and parents at this concern. I'm just kind of connecting. There's the results of our survey to Achenbach. Parents are saying overwhelmingly, I have a lot of significant concerns about my child. So that makes sense to bring that over and pair it with Achenbach and say, since you are concerned, and we know everybody's concerned about how the kids are doing, is it possible for you to complete this and send it to us, because we want to help with regard to taking care of whatever you're concerned about. Again, I'm going to be available. You have my email if you have also specific questions and so on. I'm happy to consult with you, and we can chat and go back and forth on email. Don, any other questions?
I don't see any new questions in the chat at this time.
Okay.
Let's just give everyone a second. So if anybody has any questions to ask, maybe Max, while their thinking. You want to go over a little bit of that other handout that you had given us, that COVID-19 piece, or?
There are, I can go over some of them in a little bit more detail, but I have also some information with regard to on my other PowerPoint I wanted to mention. If we can go back, yes, if we can go back to the first PowerPoint. So what they would be receiving is certainly the guidelines Don mentioned. There's a lot coming out of CDC. There are a lot of handouts about the guidelines with regard to COVID in particular. I have be forwarding to you resources in terms of community mental health services. We did go over some of the models. I'm going to send you in terms of information about trauma-informed care and SEL in terms of how you incorporate it very specifically, kind of a step-by-step with regard to your school. If some of you said your school buildings are now trauma-informed care, how to, basically, these are how-to kind of articles that you're going to get. I'm going to send you some other information on trauma screening in particular, you know, in terms of coping skills, how to identify, some of the assessment tools that you're going to be getting some information on. These are some of the things I'm going to send to you. One of the things I wanted to, in the remaining time I want to discuss with you is that the School Mental Health Resource and Training Center. How many of you are aware of this center?
That would be a yes/no question, and let me just.
Correct.
I have 3 no's so far, 4 no's.
Okay, that's what I was concerned about. This is a center that was set up by Office of Mental Health and Mental Health Association of New York State, exclusively for school districts. This is a tremendous resource for all of you, for administrators, for teachers, for the parents, for the students themselves. They have forums, they have lists of trainings, they have so many items. I put it in the PowerPoint that you are going to get. But one of the concerns is that New York State put last year about $1 million to set this up, and I understand it's going to continue, but it's a regular resource that is readily available for you. And if you want to know about trainings and you want to know about forms, you want to know about, in fact, Amy Malloy, her name is Amy Malloy, at the helm at the center at New York State level. She's more than happy to discuss things with you in terms of your school, whatever you may need with regard to and whatever trainings. Wildlife Network actually is kind of a conduit for a lot of the trainings to school districts relating to mental health law, how to incorporate and set up certain partnerships with your community, as well as providing trainings for, oh, thank you, here we go.
So it's called the School Mental Health Resource and Training Center, everyone. I'll put this link in the chat room.
Right, it's there and it's in the PowerPoint that they're gonna get. The information is there.
Okay.
Any questions are coming up? I think we are at the 11th hour.
Any questions, Don? I can't find my chat room.
I'm looking now, I don't see any new questions. Someone asked about the Resource Center.
There you go.
I put the link in the chat.
Oh, thank you, because I don't know why I can't access it all of a sudden.
No, I don't see any new questions at this time, Max.
Okay.
Great. Well, we'll just give you maybe, I guess I'm practicing that wait time that Kate always practices and Don. So if anybody has any questions, I do see some thank yous, and we do want to thank you, Max, for, we see very helpful here from Bill Fisher, and thank you. You're really very knowledgeable, and you shared a lot of your information today with us, and we really appreciate you sharing your information and time. We have quite a few thank yous in the chat for you. So thank you for all this information and the resources, and we look forward to receiving those additional resources that you mentioned. We will share them out as an email to the attendees, but I believe that we will also post them, if we have the space on our website, on the think tank page.
Well, just as a last sentence I'm going to share, I think since as I mentioned before, this is going to be an individualized plan for each school district based on resources, based on the community is served. I strongly urge them to, if there are questions about certain things that they would need, so I'll be more than happy to assist in terms of any specific questions or even general questions that we can send to everyone at the end.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. I actually did put your email into the chat room so that everybody could email you. And you said, I think it's also on your PowerPoint, which we will be posting. Absolutely. I apologize to everyone here in advance. I did start the recording about 15 minutes in, so I apologize we missed the very beginning. But that recording will also be on our think tank. Thank you so much, Max.
Thank you, and keep safe, and good luck.
Thank you, Max. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, Don and Bernadette, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Stay well.
I certainly recognize some of the names. Let's see the names. Amy Jackson.